Good afternoon. I am Tracy Sinclair, and we are going now live to a press conference with Governor Mike Dunleavy. He is also going to have Mayor Bronson, the Department of Natural Resources Commissioner John Boyle, and the Department of Revenue Commissioner Fadil Limani. We will be going to that. It looks like the feed is just getting ready to start, so we will, within moments, go down to a live press conference with Governor Mike Dunleavy. He's talking about Cook Inlet gas supplies.
In particular, we understand and we know that for some time Cook Inlet's gas production has been on a downward trend. We can all recall back in 2010 when we would see brownout commercials by the mayors at that time. That was addressed at that time through some incentives. And so the question is come up again, what's going on with Cook Inlet? Are we going to have enough gas? Because there's been discussions with utilities, end users, and just generally Alaskans wondering if we're going to have gas for the rail belt is what we're talking about. And the answer is yes, and we're going to talk about that today. So today we're going to roll out a concept that's going to be put in bill form and introduced into the legislature on the first day of the legislative session. And that bill will deal with incentivizing Cook Inlet gas so that we get more gas. We believe, and we'll talk about that here in a moment, that there's actually a large amount of gas still untapped in Cook Inlet that once we tap it through this one process that we're going to talk about, we believe that we could start to see increases in production in 2 to 3 years if it's passed by the legislature. So there's been talk about importing gas. There's been talk about a large LNG line. There's been talk about coal methane that goes back several years. There's all kinds of discussions on how are we going to have energy security. And what I want the people of Alaska to understand is we have tremendous amounts of energy in Alaska. We have tremendous amounts of energy all over the state of Alaska, including here in the rail belt. As we've discussed, for example, during our sustainable energy conferences we've had the past 2 years in May, we have geothermal energy that we're working on. We have wind, onshore and offshore wind. We have tidal energy. We have coal resources. We have gas resources, oil resources. We have biomass. 43 million acres of trees under the state of Alaska in interior Alaska and south central Alaska. So we have tremendous opportunities. The question has always been how do we harness this for in-state use so that it is sustainable and it's as low-cost energy as possible.
Reporters on Zoom, please make sure your phone is muted.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback here, guys. Anyway, so with that said, what we're going to do is I'm going to have the mayor of Anchorage come up too, because he and I actually started this discussion that led to this point quite some time ago. We have meetings periodically, and in one of the meetings we both brought up, and I got to commend the mayor for saying that. Where are we at with the gas situation in the inlet? Because people are going to be concerned. It affects my city. It affects the rail belt. And so we began a discussion about different possibilities. And I asked him to be here today to actually hear about the rollout. But basically, this approach, once again in bill form, that would be contemplated by the legislature during this coming session, we believe will increase production of gas in Cook Inlet. We believe that it will help really address some of the concerns about gas in the midterm. The long-term prospects for us really are coming from the slope and other types of energy approaches. But nonetheless, we're on top of this. We're going to talk about that here in detail here in just a second once I turn this over to the mayor. And then after the mayor, I'm going to have Commissioner Boyle come up, talk about what's going on with this approach, and then we'll open it up for questions from the press. So, Mayor?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you especially for your leadership, you and your administration on this issue. This is a critical issue for the Rail Belt, Alaska, and certainly for the city of Anchorage. Geographically, we're the single largest user of natural gas in the on the Rail Belt, and so this is critical for us. Energy security, that is keeping the lights on and keeping the heat on in the winter. The governor's effort deals with that directly. We're going to support this effort full board in Juneau. We're going to meet with the Anchorage delegation and I should say the Anchorage caucus, and we will be down in Juneau here this spring supporting this effort because of the importance of it. This is talking about keeping lights on and keeping our homes heated. And right now we need to understand Cook Inlet does have the natural gas that we need. It's there. The purpose of this legislation that we are supporting and that I'm supporting is to incentivize bringing that natural gas to market for the good of everyone along the rail belt and especially Anchorage. So with that, we're ready and willing to move forward with the governor on this effort and support this legislative effort to solve this problem. So thank you, Governor.
Thanks, Mayor. John?
Yeah, thanks, Governor and Mr. Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today on behalf of the Department of Natural Resources. I mean, as the Governor's mentioned, the issues with supply constraint in the Cook Inlet aren't related to the geology. They're related to the economics. The USGS estimates that there's over 19 trillion cubic feet of natural gas available in the Cook Inlet that's technically recoverable. And of course, what's technically recoverable and what's economically recoverable is really at issue here. And so the heart of what DNR took a look at is what levers do we have within our control, within our power, to help incentivize or to make economic these existing gas resources that we know are there. And so the governor tasked us to take a hard look at that. My team in the Division of Oil and Gas got together and really combed through what they felt were the most efficacious tools that we had at our disposal to get that. And what you're going to see in this legislation is really a reflection of that work. I mean, we firmly believe that by creating a more competitive economic environment in the Cook Inlet, that we will see economic activity increase, we will see more exploration, we'll see more development, and ultimately we'll see more production, which will trickle out to greater energy security for the rail belt and for Alaska at large. But fundamentally, our charge is to figure out how we get new production on quickly, and that's why this legislation, we believe, is the best tool that we have to get us there. In essence, what we're looking at with the legislation is looking at reducing the state's royalty take on new gas that's produced in the inlet. So again, we're not talking about changing the terms for existing production. That production will continue to be taxed and will continue to pay a royalty at the standard 12.5%. But what we're really looking at is reducing that royalty rate to improve individual project economics that we know will help incentivize bringing some of this new gas and some of this new oil into production. Ultimately, by creating a healthier economic environment, not only can we expect to see increased supplies of natural gas, but we'll also see increased production of oil. And production of oil is another element of the Cook Inlet, which is important because, as many of you know, the oil that we produce in the Cook Inlet is refined here in the state, which comprises a large percent of the gasoline that we're using to fill up our cars, and as well as the aviation fuel that we use to supply the industry. So again, incentivizing and encouraging more economic development and activity in the inlet will help us continue to produce those really important commodities, as well as just, of course, promoting a healthy economic climate in the Kenai Peninsula, where we have a lot of service companies and other suppliers that are critical components to the overall economy down there with the work that they do with the oil and gas industry. So we really see this as a way of incentivizing this new activity that will not only increase economic activity, but of course, again, ultimately, the goal here is to increase that gas that is available for Alaskans. But DNR isn't solely resting on this legislation alone as the only solution in the toolbox. We have also recently announced an upcoming lease sale in which DNR is changing the terms of the leases in an utilizing a novel approach that we haven't used previously, and that is, instead of having a bonus bid and a royalty component, we're shifting over to where the state instead will have a fixed bonus bid component to the leases, but also have a net profit share component to these new leases that companies are acquiring. So that is, instead of coming in and paying a state a flat royalty rate as they start producing new oil, companies will only pay the state based upon their ability to be profitable or not. And again, this is one way that the state can help de-risk and improve the economics of projects that might be marginal. So without the state taking these steps, we think that certain companies might not see the returns that they need in order to justify making these investments. So by making the state a partner with them in terms of, we take our share when they're profitable, when they're actually cash flow positive and making money, that way we can help ensure that those companies have the incentive and have the underlying economics that will help support that new development. And we believe that this innovative approach will help move the needle when it comes to activity that we see in upcoming lease sales. So we're very excited to see the results of that. This net profit share component is very similar to what you see in other jurisdictions around the world that have a production sharing contract that generally governs the fiscal terms that the sovereign extracts from companies in the oil and gas sector. So again, we think that utilizing this approach here in the Cook Inlet will help improve project economics, will help incentivize companies to go after, again, this immense resource that we know exists, and ultimately get us to a point to where we're talking about producing more and more natural gas in the inlet and less around potential shortfalls with some of the contracts that we're talking about. So we're very excited about this. We fully anticipate seeing great results, and we're looking forward to having conversations with the legislature on our legislative proposal as we move forward here into the legislative session. And so with that, I'll step back and turn things over to Deputy Commissioner Lamani with the Department of Revenue.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle, and thank you, Governor, and good afternoon to all of you, and thank you all for being here. On behalf of the Department of Revenue, we share the same sentiments of all the comments that are being made today, and we believe that this legislative proposal is an initial step, positive step, in being able to incentivize investments in the Cook Inlet Basin in an effort to provide affordable energy in the rail belt. So that being said, all of you may be wondering, well, what does this cost to the state? And that cost is actually zero. And the reason for that is because the proposed legislation focuses on the qualified new development of new pools and new production. So simply put, the current 12.5% of zero is actually zero. So in essence, 1% of something is better than 100% of nothing. If a qualified new production does come online as a result of the proposed legislation, then that would essentially have a positive revenue impact. I also want to highlight that the revenues associated with the current existing fields and the royalty share, those will stay intact, and there will be no change there. The forecast revenues for FY24 for the existing royalties based on the current proposed legislation is projected at $60 million. With that, I will turn this back to the Governor. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Grant, are we ready to open it up for questions?
I will start with reporters on the teleconference with James Brooks with the Alaska Beacon.
Yes, a question for the Commissioner. I'm curious how the new legislation differs from your authority to waive royalties if it's in the state's best interest. Is this a power you already have?
Yeah, so the authority that we're utilizing under the new leases that we are putting out for bid here in the next couple of months, that does fall squarely within my authority as Commissioner of DNR to change those particular variables, which is why we are offering that net profit share lease term for those new leases. On the legislation, however, that's where we need authorization to adjust the royalty rate in areas that are currently under lease, but again, as the Deputy Commissioner of Revenue mentioned, are new pools that still haven't, where we haven't seen existing production.
All right, next we have Becky Bohr with the Associated Press. Becky?
I also have a question for the Commissioner. Can you speak a bit about the timeline for all of this? I mean, obviously, session will be in 2024. Hillcorp had raised concerns from the utilities about issues starting in 2027. What is sort of the timeline if this legislation is enacted that the state could expect to see new gas brought online?
Yeah, that's a great question, Becky. Thanks. We fully anticipate seeing new production, new exploration activities take place. I mean, if assuming the legislature enacts this legislation in May and the bill's signed soon, we see that activity and potential new development coming online within that few-year time window. So 2 to 3 years, I think, is an accurate estimate of when we could expect to see new activity that ultimately results in increased gas production.
Yeah, just one thing. Becky, remember that in the discussion that Hillcorp had with the state and utilities basically said that starting in 2027, it would be incumbent upon all of us to really consider where we're going to get additional gas. Doesn't mean gas is going to end. Doesn't mean it drops off to nothing. And so if this bill is passed, the belief is that we could start putting gas into the system at that point, which would extend our timeline, hopefully for several years, if not beyond, which gives us time, again, to implement some of the other initiatives that we're going to talk about later on this fall in preparation for the session. But we've made energy one of the top priorities, obviously, for the state of Alaska, not just for the rail belt, but throughout the state of Alaska. But this particular issue, dealing with the rail belt, again, we believe that this process helps with the timing of the very issues you just brought up, and we believe that it'll start putting gas into the system that'll help alleviate that 2027 issue in which the production of gas was going to continue to go in a downward trend, but this may change that whole paradigm.
All right, next we have Jack Barnwell with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner.
Yes, I just got a general question. Do you expect any resistance to this legislation?
You never know, right? We would like to think that there won't be. This is going to produce more gas. This is going to alleviate a lot of concern on the part of utilities and individual Alaskans, businesses, et cetera. We believe that this is a process in which we have known quantities of gas in the inlet. There may be, there's always going to be questions, but how much resistance or what that will look like, I'm not sure. But you would tend to think that this would be something that's going to be welcomed, at least for people to really understand that. I think once they do, I think we're going to get support for this.
All right, next we have Nick Sorrell with KSRM.
Yeah, I just want to know, with the fuel shortages being talked about, how are the fuel storage facilities in the Kenai Peninsula Borough going to factor into this new legislation?
Fuel shortages are we talking about?
Yeah, I don't know.
What fuel shortages are you referring to? Are you talking about international, nationally, here in the state? I'm not sure.
Well, just since the press conference was about the gas cap, that was the release for the conference was that we would be discussing a gas cap, and so that just seemed like a shortage issue.
We're not sure what you're referencing, to be honest with you.
Okay, well then just move on, I guess.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, next we have Tim Bradner. Tim, go ahead if you have a question. All right, we will move on. Next, we have Jeff Landfield with the Alaska Landmine.
Boyle, I'm curious, assuming the legislature goes along with this, we've already spent billions in Cook Inlet on exploration credits in the past, and the tax is near zero. So I guess, are you confident this will be different than what we're looking at imports in the next several years? Why would this be different than what's happened in the past?
That's a great question, Jeff. We think that it'll certainly alleviate the need to ponder importing gas because of the amounts of gas that are there. We believe there's still a large amount of gas in the inlet. I'll let the commissioner talk about why he thinks this particular approach is going to help alleviate that. But from what we've seen, we've been talking about this for some time, obviously. This is not something that was put together in a week. This has been going on for quite a while since we came into office. What do we do with Cook Inlet? But we do believe that this approach will help tremendously. But I'll let him comment on this, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jeff. I think the big difference that you see with this particular proposal versus what we've seen in the past is really we've looked at how do we tailor this solution to get the outcome that we're really interested in, which is more production. So in the past, you've seen sometimes economic incentives that might be tied to ancillary activities around oil and gas that don't necessarily equate to increased production. For instance, you might just incentivize companies to spend more money or to do other activities that don't necessarily translate over to increased production. So by focusing on both the royalty rate and in some of these future leases, a net profit share component, we believe that we're really honing in on those variables that are key considerations for companies to make when it comes to making an investment go or no-go decision. So we're really trying to fine-tune this to drive the outcome of getting more production and not just necessarily getting folks to spend more money so that the state has to outlay money in credits or things like that.
All right, next we have Adriana Hernandez Santana with KSRM.
So could you speak to any existing LNG contracts or utilities that you guys are potentially looking at signing?
We aren't signing utility. We don't. We aren't signing utility contracts. We're the owner of the gas. The leases have been made and will be made under new lease sales. This is just a restructuring of royalty to assist with explorers and producers to tap into that gas. The contracts are negotiated by those that have the leases with the utilities. So that's probably a better discussion for those folks.
All right, next we go to Ashlyn O'Hara with the Peninsula Clarion.
Yeah, thank you. The folks here on the Kenai, saw during the most recent state and federal lease sales when Hillcorp was the only bidder. And I'm wondering the extent to which the state of Alaska has been in communication with developers who did not participate in the most recent sales to figure out whether or not that royalty rate was the driving factor behind their decision not to bid in the region. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy for that question. I think what we're seeing from the federal government is an elevation of climate change and other sort of ideological considerations over an acknowledgement of the need for energy security and affordability in Alaska. What we're seeing with federal policy in the Cook Inlet and what we've seen with federal policy, frankly, across the spectrum in Alaska when it comes to natural resource development on any front, whether it's timber or mining or oil and gas in the inlet, on the North Slope, where have you, is that the federal government is creating a climate of uncertainty in terms of companies not knowing that if they actually bid on leases, whether they'll be given a fair shake in the permitting process or whether federal agencies will interminably drag out the process to keep them from being able to actually get and acquire the permits that they need. They also don't have any confidence that if they bid on these leases and win them, that the federal government won't make a decision like they just did in Anwar, where they terminate those leases or those contracts based on some erroneous conclusion of the law that they want to draw. So really, the federal government is squarely responsible for creating this environment to where companies don't want to come and bid and engage. And the federal government uses its own bad actions And the fact that they are intimidating industry to participate is a justification for why they shouldn't be offering lease sales to begin with. But they're creating the shortages that they themselves want to see. And I think it's an affront to all of us here in the state that want to see affordable energy produced, that want to see the resources that we have near our homes produced so that we can lower the cost of energy and increase reliability of supply, to see our federal government working against us at every turn.
All right, next.
Let me second that. I'll go a step further. Alaska is being singled out and brutalized by this administration. It's somewhat schizophrenic at best, meaning we have a portion of this federal administration that's supportive of our LNG approach on the slope, which is a good thing. Yet at the same time, we'll have elements of the administration wanting to close down NPRA, ANWR, offshore, et cetera. This is really problematic for a state like Alaska, which we are basically the size of a county population-wise at the top of the world, and we are not connected to a continental grid like many of the lower 48 states are. So the lower 48 has the opportunity to wield in power from one state to the other for the most part. Their energy mix is very different and connected. State of Alaska, 730,000 people spread out over a subcontinent. We've got a whole mixture of everything from 100% renewable in Kodiak, hydro in the southeast and coast, western and rural Alaska. A lot of it is diesel, which we know causes a high cost in energy for folks out there. The rail belt has had coal, has had gas. We have the energy. This country has the energy, but unfortunately, this administration, to be honest with you, and I think I'm being fair, has created chaos, not just in this country, but across the world. I mean, we used to be a reliable partner internally and with regard to our foreign relations. Right now, there's concern internationally that we're not, and there's concern internally. We see it here in Alaska. So what we're seeing is a forced conversion to another type of approach to energy. This is not being market-driven, but when you sow uncertainty across the board, it shouldn't surprise anyone that investors are hesitant to invest, especially in a place like Alaska, because of its small size, especially in a place like Alaska, that the federal government and a lot of their acolytes would like to believe should be a national park for the entire country. It's problematic for us. And so we're relieved when we get support on an energy project here or there, and we are dismayed, and in some cases it's crushing when we aren't. But I would say that what you see in large part across Alaska is not that we're running out of the resource. And this bill that's being proposed is somewhat illustrates that. We know we have gas in the inlet. We know if we adjust the royalty rate on some of that gas, we'll get more gas. The federal government knows that if they sow uncertainty in the permitting process, the environmental study process, they could slow things down to the point where investors will go to places maybe in Africa, in Asia, South America, where the very damage that they want to, quote, prevent in Alaska will be magnified and exponential, but that does not appear to be the issue for some of these folks. So, again, it's a constant fight with our own government to try and let us survive as a state and prosper as a state. Thanks for the question.
A reminder to folks on the teleconference to have your phone muted when you're not asking a question. Next, we'll go to Nat Hurst with Northern Journal.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking some questions. So I know there are also some wind and solar developers out there in Alaska who have heard discussions about potential incentives for increased gas production and said, like, what about us? Because we can help solve the problem actually in the same way as increased natural gas can. And so, wonder what you guys would say to those kinds of folks who are looking at this proposal and saying this is not leveling the playing field when, we, for example, I know there's one company that is looking at mental health trust land and would have to pay similar royalties.
Yeah, great question, Nat. And as you know, Nat, we've been working on an all-in approach to energy for the past several years since we got into office. The past 2 years, we didn't lose you. The past 2 years, we've put on what we believe is a world-class energy conference to highlight the very thing that you're talking about. What I would say to wind producers and solar producers, we're going to be having discussions. We've been having discussions with hydrogen producers, as well as synthetic fuel producers. They're really looking at Alaska now because of our efforts, but also because of incentives that were passed in a bill by Congress. So what I would say to those folks is continue to come to Alaska and talk to us about what your proposals are. We have plenty of land, we have plenty of wind, we have plenty of opportunities here. We'll listen to your proposals, but I would also say give us a little bit more time to fully develop our package so we can articulate it to the legislature as well as the public. But I think you're going to see a number of things in there that are going to really address what, once again, is an all-in approach that would encompass sources such as wind as well.
All right, next we have Riley Board with KDLL.
Yeah, hi. So as others have mentioned, Hillcorp has been the only bidder in recent Cook Inlet lease sales. Can you give examples of the type of producers you're hoping to attract with the net profit share system, and have you heard any positive reception from possible bidders since the announcement of that incentive?
Yeah, thanks for that. This is Commissioner Boyle. We have 3 different companies right now that are operating within the Cook Inlet, and it is true that Hillcorp has generally been one of the larger bidders in our lease sales, but we fully expect some of these new terms to help incentivize some of the other existing operators to take a second look at adding more lease acreage to their position. And of course, we hope that by offering some of these more attractive fiscal terms that we might incentivize new companies that aren't currently producing or exploring in Alaska to come up to the Cook Inlet and take a look at what we have going on so that we can hopefully spur more competition and more activity through incentivizing new investors coming up into the state.
All right, in the room now I have Steve Kirsch with Alaska's News Source.
Yeah, hi. This question is for Mayor Bronson. Sir, have you had an opportunity to talk to our Anchorage delegates about this? And if you haven't, when do you plan on? And if you have, what kind of reaction have you gotten from them on this?
Thanks, Steve, for the question. I have not, but as I said in my remarks, we're going to reach out to the Anchorage caucus and collaborate on this in our support, our strident support of the governor's legislation in this matter.
Keep in mind, the bill's not going to be filed till legislative session, but the concepts we're articulating now. So,
all right, next we have LaShawn Donaldson with Your Alaska Link.
So how does this proposed legislation is beneficial to the Cook Inlet? How is the proposed legislation beneficial to the Cook Inlet?
It's going to incentivize more production. We know we have gas in the inlet, as was stated. Right now, under the terms in which the producers are producing gas with the state, some of it's not economic to pursue. With these changes, we believe that it'll become economic. They'll pursue it, put more gas, produce more gas out of the inlet, and then that gas can then be marketed to our utilities and be able to power the rail belt, electricity-wise, heating gas through companies such as NSTAR, et cetera. So it's going to produce more gas is the hope.
All right, next we have Alex DeMarban with the Anchorage Daily News.
Thanks. So what would the royalty rate be reduced to, and how would you determine what the right amount is to incentivize more gas?
Well, that's what is currently under development. We have, of course, a commercial team at our Division of Oil and Gas that are really good, that have economic models, for instance, that they can put together to model hypothetical oil fields based on publicly available information or not that we have that helps us understand in a general sense what the economic parameters around a given project are. So the royalty rates that we'll be looking at will be in the neighborhood of one that we feel confident will help spur that go, no-go decision when it comes to making an investment decision in the inlet.
And our last question comes from Andrew Kitchenman with the Alaska Beacon.
Thanks. What assurance, if any, do you have from the producers that they will act as a result of this?
Well, I'll make a comment and then let these folks come in. The producers want to make a dollar. They want to make a buck. That's why they're in this business. Right now, some of this gas is not economic for a number of reasons. We believe, just through conversations, past practice, and what models are occurring other places, that if you reduce the royalty, this gas then becomes economical for those folks to pursue with financing, et cetera. And so we're pretty confident that we can squeeze more gas out of the inlet through this process. And as the bill is rolled out and goes through the committee process, a lot of the details that we're talking about right now will be laid on the table and discussed. But we do believe from conversations, other models, that this is an opportunity for us. And so we believe that we will have producers that are currently here, and maybe some others that will come in. But for the ones that are here and understand the inlet, again, what's exciting for us is we believe that we can get gas flowing in 2 to 3 years, which will then assist with that drop off in some of the gas that we're currently producing. So we got a lot of pools of gas out there. We've got a lot of pockets of gas out there. There's no doubt about it. That's been confirmed by a number of different independent agencies. So we believe through this process, we make it more economic. They'll drill, we'll get more gas. Okay. So I want to thank everyone for coming here. And the purpose of this conference, again, is we've been working on this issue for some time on different ideas. This idea, we believe, is going to really be able to help with production in the inlet. And we want to let the people of Alaska know, the utilities of Alaska, the businesses of Alaska, that we believe we have an answer for this, the diminishing supply of gas in the inlet, and that's to produce more gas from the inlet. And we believe we have a method to do that in making it more economical, feasible for gas producers. And so we're looking forward to further discussions on this with gas producers, with potential new gas producers, as well as with the legislature. We just want to assure people especially in the rail belt, that we're on top of the issue. This is one approach. As the commissioner mentioned, we're also looking at new leases being leased and those leases sold under regimes that we hope will incentivize folks to produce gas here. But we have a whole host of different initiatives that we're going to be tying together here in a package that we'll deliver to the legislature. And we'll be talking with the people of Alaska here once those initiatives are put together and packaged. But we have tremendous opportunities out here in Cook Inlet. As I tell people, and nobody really argues with it, this inlet is probably one of the most energy-rich basins in the world. Within 40 miles, you got coal, you have gas, you have oil, onshore wind, offshore wind. You have geothermal, you have tidal. We have biomass resources up and down the rail belt and across the interior, as well as Southeast Alaska. The question has always been, how do we harness this given our small scale, given the fact that we can't wield in power from other states? So we're on our own, but we have the ability to take care of ourselves. And so this is one approach. We just want to assure the people of Alaska, especially on the rail belt, the lights aren't going to go out. Lights are going to stay on. And we're going to continue sharing with the people of Alaska the different initiatives that we're looking at that we think are going to make Alaska internally energy independent, that we believe that will make Alaska over time actually a cost-effective place to live and do business here in Alaska. And so anyway, we're excited about this possibility. We look forward to working with the legislature, and we'll continue to discuss these initiatives with the people of Alaska. So I want to thank all of you, and everyone have a great day.
And that was Governor Mike Dunleavy just finishing up a press conference talking about a new proposal for leases in Cook Inlet. And as you just heard, the governor said that we have a lot of energy in Alaska. Earlier, Commissioner Boyle, he's with Department of Natural Resources, said that the recovery of gas in Cook Inlet is not a geologic issue, it is an economic issue. And they're trying to create a more competitive economic environment so that we will be able to, within about 3 years, 2 to 3 years, they said, have more gas coming out of Cook Inlet. And one of the ways that they said is they will be reducing the royalty rate on new sales. They're not going to change the existing leases that are out there, but that they would be reducing the state's royalty rate, which is currently at 12.5%. They also said with the upcoming lease sale, they're going to try a new approach. They said it would be a fixed bonus bid and a net profit share, meaning that until the company is profitable, the state would not start taking its royalty. We also heard from the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Revenue, and he said that this will be no cost to the state because we are talking about future leases in this proposed legislation. So that is the basic situation, the basic message that they had. They're also hoping that with this change in the royalty rate, they will be more companies will start participating in these leasing bids. Governor Dunleavy and Commissioner Boyle both firmly put the lack of bidders for the last lease sale on the federal government, saying that the federal government has created a climate of uncertainty. Governor Dunleavy actually said that he thinks Alaska is being singled out and also can't even read my own handwriting, but it's being singled out for these kinds of issues because we're dealing with energy here in Alaska. Of course, we will have more tonight on Alaska's news source. You can find us at 4, 5, 6, and 10, and you can find all the day's news on alaskasnewssource.com, on our apps, or on our streaming platforms. Thank you so much for joining us.